novels and popularity that he so wanted in his life. But after the publication of 1984, he started to resent his own popularity. That, my friends, is the supreme irony of life. The Writer's Preview is a platform for writers to showcase their latest works. And on today's episode, we are happy to welcome Avanti Centrae to LITREAL Broadcast. We are happy to have Avanti Centrae here with us. How are you, Avanti?
I am well, Karthik. How about yourself? Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much, Avanti. I'm fine. And how is the pandemic situation there in California, Avanti?
Well, it hasn't been good. We've been in lockdown for a long time. You can see my hair is getting, longer by the day. It's hard to even get a haircut here. But they are starting to roll out the vaccines, and we're all hopeful that those will be rolled out soon, and life will slowly start to get back to normal. How about there, where you're at in southern India?
In here, in particular in Tamil Nadu, our government is doing our best to control the spread of the virus. And when you mentioned haircut, here I heard of a good story in Tamil Nadu where a barber kept on giving haircuts for more than 150 of his customers, even though he had corona. And the funny thing is that none of his customers were infected by the virus because he wore a mask. So the importance of wearing a mask is really important, because he kept on giving haircuts to his customers because of the only fact that he wore a mask despite his infection. That's
yes, we have. I've got all kinds of different masks when I go out in public, and I'm sure you do too. It's it's a little bit. It's nice to be able to see your whole face, but we have to do what we have to do, and hopefully within. I'm hoping by summer that enough people will be vaccinated that we can start to relax a little bit.
Yeah. As readers, we are always interested to know about the person behind the words. Can you tell us about yourself, Avanti, and also your writing journey?
Absolutely, Karthik. So we have to go back a long time ago, because when I was quite young, about the time my mother was teaching me to tie my shoes, she started to teach me to read. And some of my most fond memories are of curling up with her, on the couch or in the chair while she would read stories to me. And we just passed the Christmas time. And when I was 3 years old, already then I had memorized The Night Before Christmas. And she liked to show me off that I could, talk that story without looking at the book. But soon, when I was in, 5, 6, 7 years old, I realized that I wanted to write, and I wrote my first story. It was quite simple. It was about a bull who saw red, with the big red cape and everything. And I continued to stories were things that kept me going, during my dark days when I was a child. And we had I don't know if you have anything like that there, and I don't know that we have anything like this any longer, but when I was young, there was a bookmobile that would come to the end of our street, and it was just packed floor to ceiling with books. And I would go down there. I was, 10 years old, and I would tromp down there, and I would take back my stack of books that I had read through the week, one book a day, and I would take it back, and I would, find the next Nancy Drew, or, the next story that I wanted to read, and I would carry them home. I think they were, bigger than I was. And I was also that kid who was in elementary school and was bored with class. And so I would sneak a book underneath my desk, so that I could read, because I had already gone through the lesson of the day. And so I was sneaking through reading. And so I realized quite young that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't study it in college because my parents were just insistent that there was no money in writing. And so I had done well with math and science, and so I took a computer degree. I went to college at Purdue University and got a computer degree and got a great job here in California, down in Los Angeles, about a mile from the beach. I worked in El Segundo for a number of years, and quickly realized that I wasn't very fond of working in an office all day. And a friend and I started to save up some money so that we could go travel the world. And this was back in, I'm going to age myself a little bit, but 1987. And we saved up a bunch of money, and we got some Eurail passes, and we went over to Europe, and we traveled around by train everywhere for about 5 months. And just had a blast. And I remember at one point I was sitting on a beach in Greece, and I had time to write, and I still had this idea that I wanted to write, but I didn't really know what to write about. And so I figured, well, I need to do some more living. And so I went and I made some more money in the computer world and did some more traveling. I made it to Canada and New Zealand and Central America, Belize and Guatemala. I've not yet made it to India, but I would love to. And I eventually became an executive in the IT world. I worked for Hewlett-Packard and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise as an IT executive. And in 2013, I decided that I was going to be hitting 50 fairly soon, and that this dream that I'd had since I was just wee tall of becoming an author, if I didn't start to pursue that dream now, life was going to pass me by, and I wasn't going to have the opportunity to do that. And at this point, by the time I was in my late 40s, I had had a lot of life experience, and I had a much better idea of what I wanted to write about. And so I started to outline my first novel, and that took me about a year. And then I got a bunch of feedback on it, and that was great to get some experts in the field, because one of the guys that I talked to was like, "Oh no, this ending has been done. You need to do something different." And so I went and did this whole rewrite, but at the outline level, which is a lot more efficient. And then once I was happy with the outline, I wrote the story, The Lost Power, the first of the VANOPS series, and it took me about a year. And then when I was done, I got feedback from another editor, and we beat it up again. And then I finally thought that I was ready to submit it. And so I submitted to a bunch of agents and finally found an agent who took me on. And then she submitted to publishers, and that process took about a year also. And finally we found a publisher that published my first book, The Lost Power, last November. So it's been just a little over a year since the first book in the series came out. So that's the lifelong journey in a nutshell.
Thank you, Auntie. Was it difficult to land a publisher despite being a new writer at the time, Avanti?
It's incredibly difficult to get a publisher, especially as a debut author, because even though I was an IT executive at the top of my field there, they don't care. Publishers don't care. They're just looking for the work that will be a breakout novel that will sell copies, because it's expensive because even though I had it edited, also edited it, right? It's expensive to have a cover designer, and most books, frankly, don't sell very well. And so it's I completely understand why publishers are incredibly picky about the works that they put out, especially genre fiction. If you're Gal Gadot or Barack Obama or some famous person, then you can write your story and everybody knows who you will, and you're going to sell 1 million copies. But when you're Avanti Centrae, nobody knows you as an author when you're first getting started. And so, yes, the publishers are incredibly picky.
Yeah, especially in this modern age where print publication is becoming out of context in most countries. But in Asia, it is predominantly active here. Even in our part of the country, we still buy books, and since we are not that much advanced in terms of technology, we still go after print books. In the United States, is the reading public aware of this print form, or are they always going after the electronic format, Avanti?
Well, I can only share with you my sales, but I have also, studied the publishing field. And it appears as though probably 80 to 90% of the sales in America are digital. And most of those, probably 70% of that, is on Amazon. So yeah, the Kindle rules the world. I do sell some books in bookstores, and I like print myself. And I love audiobooks, and it's interesting with the lockdown, I've started to read more in the electronic format, and as I get older, my eyes don't see the page quite as well, and especially when it's, we have these long dark winters, and it's hard to get the lighting just right so that I can see the print book. So I've started to read a little bit more electronically myself. But yeah, print, I grew up on print. Print is fantastic. But how about audiobooks? Do you like audiobooks at all?
I tried listening to audiobooks, but nothing beats the feel of having a print book in your hand, and having the feel of turning one page after the other. I mean, the immersion is there, despite its discomforts. The immersion is completely there, and it's like a daydream. But when you read electronically or listen to an audiobook, it's not the same. It's not on the same level, I feel, Avanti.
Yeah, it's interesting how different people experience it, in different ways. I kind of fell in love with audiobooks, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, when they first started to come out, and I was doing a lot of driving at the time, and it's really fun for me, especially when you resonate with the actor. And Tim Campbell reads both of mine, and he's got this, deep voice that just the first time I heard him when he auditioned to read The Lost Power, it just gave me chills. And so I feel like for me, sometimes an audiobook can really hit the spot. But when I'm not driving, then it's I might as well check out the print or check out the ebook. Yeah.
So Tim Campbell reads your audiobooks. Is that right, Avanti?
Yes. Yes, he's an award-winning narrator with this really great deep voice.
He talks in the characters of voices. There are many characters in the books, right, Avanti?
Yeah, and that's kind of the neat thing about the audiobook is, when an actor reads it, they can do all sorts of different voices, and I like to write characters for the audiobook, right? So I have in these two books that we're talking about today, we've got a female protagonist named Maddie Marshall, and she's got kind of a plain accent. She's a California girl like I am, and her brother Will doesn't have much of an accent either, but the man that they hook up with is a fellow that they knew in high school, and he's a former Marine. He's this big burly guy with big broad shoulders, and he's from the South. So he's got a little bit of an accent, and I can't do accents very well, but Tim Campbell does a great job with the accents. And so and I've got Russians in there, and a little kid. So all of those different accents, it's really fun to hear a character actor like Tim, do a fantastic job with all the different accents. I love it.
It's good to have many choices for the readers. They can buy a print form, electronic format, as well as an audio format. And Solstice Shadows came out a few months ago, and it is part of the VANOPS series. And I believe it's the third in the novel. And it's also a thriller novel. Can you tell us something about Solstice Shadows, Avanti?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the second novel in the VANOPS series. And like the first one, this whole series is sort of a Da Vinci Code meets Tomb Raider type of international thriller, as opposed to, domestic thrillers, international thrillers. I really like the international aspect. As we talked earlier, I've traveled all over the world. And so these are international thrillers. And Solstice Shadows picks up where The Lost Power ended. So it's a little bit of a sequel if people haven't read either. Solstice Shadows is a standalone, but many readers have commented that after they read The Lost Power, Solstice Shadows is a little bit better for them. And so Solstice Shadows begins on a dark night in San Francisco. And Maddie Marshall is an Aikido black belt. And she's got this young 9-year-old boy named AJ that she's wanting to adopt, and he's been taking classes with her down at the dojo. And her ex-boyfriend shows up, and he wants to walk her home. And she's thinking, oh, this guy wants me back, but he's a scumbag. He broke up with me in the first book. I don't want him back, but I don't want to make a scene. So he walks her home, and they get to her loft apartment in San Francisco. And she cracks open the door, and she thinks she sees something. And what happens in the first couple of chapters is there's a Russian thief there who's there to steal a very ancient star chart. And the star chart is pretty cool. I wish we could have included an illustration of it in the book, but you can kind of imagine it looks sort of like a constellation, like you're looking up at the sky. And it's very old on some very thin paper. And this Russian guy takes the star chart. And so Maddie calls her boyfriend, who's part of VANOPS. And VANOPS stands for Vanguard Operations. And it's a deep secret unit inside the CIA designed to track down obscure threats. So things that are a little bit unusual. So she calls him up, and she's like, hey, family rumor is that the star chart leads to something very, very dangerous, a superconductive meteorite. And he's like, well, if it does, we don't want the Russians to get their hands on it. And she's like, I know. And he's thinking, well, and they're really not even sure at first if it is the Russians, because her family is Spanish. She's a descendant of an ancient royal king, and her family knows about this star chart. So the Russians and the Spaniards know about this. And so Bear, our former Marine turned covert ops guy, goes to his director and says, hey, boss, this is bad news. And the director says, you know what? I was actually just going to assign you the Indian ambassador, or the Russian ambassador to India has just been murdered. Actually, it's the Indian ambassador to Russia. Sorry, lots of ambassadors there. So anyway, this ambassador has been murdered, and the director wants them to go chase it down and has a feeling that there's some kind of connection there. And sure enough, before long, we realize that the bad guys, the antagonists, want to use this ancient meteorite and the superconductive power within it to power a quantum computer. So I get to pull in some of that, IT executive stuff. And for people who don't know what a quantum computer is, it's the next generation of computing that makes what we have today just look like a turtle, just super, super slow. And this is actually a real thing right now, that there's a kind of a computer race going on between Russia, China, America, India, etc. Everybody's trying to figure out who can who can get a quantum computer first, because if you can basically break all encryption. So it's like the holy grail of encryption breaking. So that sort of starts the whole quest, and it takes place in a variety of places that have archaeoastronomy aspects to them, because they can't figure out the star chart doesn't relate to any constellation. So their best guess is that there might be a building somewhere, like Stonehenge or Chichen Itza in Mexico, or someplace where the ancients built buildings that aligned with the stars. So they take off around the world and try to figure out, they try to solve the puzzle of this encrypted star chart before the bad guys trigger a high-tech apocalypse.
Thank you, Avanti. That was it gave us a really in-depth look at what we can expect from Solstice Shadows. And your expertise in the IT field must have really helped you in writing this book, and the first book also in the VANOPS series. Can you tell us how your expertise in the subject molded you, and did it help you in coming up with the story, Avanti?
Absolutely. So every good thriller has a big threat, right? Some kind of global threat. And in the first book, we also have some superconductivity. In this case, it's going to power an electromagnetic pulse weapon. And these things were discovered back in the 50s or something. And basically, it's like a nuke that's exploded in the atmosphere, and it can take your cell phone and just melt it like a Salvador Dali painting. Okay, that's what these EMP devices do. And in the second book, we're talking more about encryption and the Internet of Things, which is like everybody who has a smart home, or the internet-enabled cars. So all of the technology that's in these books is something that I was very familiar with when I worked in corporate America for Hewlett-Packard and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. So it's amazing how technology can be used for good, and it's nearly ubiquitous in our lives these days. There's just look at us right now. We're talking on a laptop from around the world, which is incredibly cool. But that also, like the hacks right now that's been happening, our United States government is pretty certain that Russia has been hacking a lot of government facilities, including the U.S. Treasury. And so, you want to be able to keep your state secrets safe, and when you can't do that, it really lets other enemies of the state get ahead of the game. So absolutely, all that time in corporate America helped a lot with the technology that has been threats in my last two novels.
Definitely, Avanti. Technology can be used for constructive purposes by bringing people together, and it can also be used for nefarious purposes like hacking and so on. Writing is a tedious process, and it is also time-consuming. Your novel Solstice Shadows hit #1 in the thriller category in both Amazon International as well as Amazon Canada website, and it also hit #11 in the Barnes & Noble bookstore. Can you give us a behind-the-scenes look at the making of an international bestseller, Avanti?
Yeah, I would love to. So we talked a little bit about how I got the good book in the first place, right? The getting feedback from other people, even when the story but even before I started writing it, I got feedback from experts in the field. And one of the things that's fascinated me is how at some point a book kind of takes on a life of its own, right? So you finish writing it as an author, but then you put it out there for feedback. I have a number of beta readers that I am so grateful for, and all of the editors that I've worked with over the years have helped me to make these stories as good as they can be. And believe me, they have changed significantly from, it's kind of funny to go back and look at some of those, early outlines and everything, and kind of how they changed. So the first part about having a book that's a potential bestseller is making it a great book. And that means a book that people emotionally resonate with. And it needs to, fit within the genre, but be a little bit different, right? If you're writing fiction. And it needs to, I think one of the biggest things is it needs to, people need to feel it, right? I love the reviews that I get when people are like, I was literally on the edge of my seat while I was reading your book, or my stomach dropped when I read that section, or I thought I was going to have a heart attack, right? So being able to evoke emotion in the reader is key, because what happens is if you put your book out there and the reviewers don't like it, I mean, you might be able to get a blurb or two from other authors, but once it starts getting out there in the world and people start reviewing it, if everybody hates it, then you're never going to get that kind of traction, no matter how much money you put towards marketing or how much PR you do. So you have to have a great book that people really resonate with. And then once you have that and you have enough reviews, then you can start thinking about, doing some marketing. And there's a variety of platforms that authors are using these days. Whether you're traditionally published or indie published, you can use things like BookBub, Facebook, Amazon to advertise your book, right? And so you got to do that. And then there's different situations like what we're doing tonight, where you can get the word out about your book. Maybe you were able to get, maybe your publicist was able to get an article in this magazine or that magazine, or maybe you were able to get on the radio, or that sort of thing. I was grateful that I had a number of newspapers that wrote articles about Solstice Shadows when it was first released, and that kind of press is invaluable for getting the word out. So those are some of the things that really go into making a bestseller. You have to have a fantastic product, a great team. You've got to price it competitively, and often that means putting it on sale. So a lot of authors will hit those bestseller lists when their book is on sale or when it first comes out, and being able to get the word out is all the ingredients to making a best-selling book.
Definitely, Avanti. And as a writer in today's world, any writer has to wear two hats simultaneously, one a writer's hat and another a businesswoman's hat. And having an agent must have really helped out with the business side of things, right, Avanti?
Yes, having an agent is very helpful, especially as you're getting started. They can help navigate the landscape. They often help correct your story. So even when I thought my story was done, I sent it to my agent, and she was like, nope, marked this up, made some suggestions and the like. And then there are many, many publishers who will not take a submission from an author without an agent. So they kind of hold the keys to the kingdom, if you will, in terms of, because publishers are so overwhelmed, they look for agents to, kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. Yeah.
Definitely, Avanti. And between The Last Power and Solstice Shadows, you have won 5 awards for your writing. What, according to you, are the makings of a good story, Avanti?
Yeah, so we touched on that a little bit with the makings of a bestseller. I think to have a really good story that is award-winning, and by the way, if you can win an award for your story, then you're going to be more likely to sell more copies. But I think that it comes back again to emotion. it's kind of interesting. A lot of thrillers are just very plot based. So it's just, what happens, what happens, what happens. I like to have my action be character driven. So I like to have very realistic characters. I think for me, a story that's good is a story that has soul. It's a story that has taken on a life of its own. It's a story that as soon as I start turning those pages, like you said, I'm just pulled into this other world, and nothing about the story pulls me out, right? So table stakes, you got to have the grammar and the punctuation and all of that good, because if you don't, then you're pulling somebody out of the story. And you have to work within your story. So you can't, if you're going to have something that's maybe a little bit paranormal in your story, you need to set it up early on that there's maybe some supernatural types of things happening in your story. If you're telling a Western, then you can't all of a sudden do something that's very sci-fi. So you need to work kind of within that. But I think characters are pretty key. And one of the things that I was able to do in my life between the time I was 4 years old and tying my shoes and the time when I was pushing 50 and started to write is I studied a lot about human nature. When I was in college, I studied some psychology and some international religions. And when I was in my 20s, I studied some things like yoga and personal growth kinds of things, and a fascinating book called The Enneagram, which is an ancient Sufi book about personality types. And I feel like the more realistic you can make your characters, the more they jump off the page and the more sympathetic they are. The more the reader is going to be emotionally invested in the action that happens. If you just have action without any sort of emotional investment in the characters, then I don't think it's a great book. I'm reading a book right now that is technically fantastic, and it's not moving me. So it's a good book, but it's not a great book because I'm not quite as emotionally invested in these characters as I want to be.
Exactly, Avanti. The readers, once they get emotionally attached to the story in the novel, they resonate with it a lot, and they are able to keep going with their reading process. There are many legends in the thriller genre, and you are a writer in the thriller genre. Do you emulate any of those writers in the genre, Avanti?
I do. James Rollins, I think, is probably the author whose work is most closely like mine. Steve Berry also, he writes the Cotton Malone thriller series. And James Rollins has a Sigma Force series. James also does some other things, but it's the Sigma Force series that I'm thinking is most like my work. And both of these gentlemen were kind enough to give me very nice quotes for The Lost Power, which was fantastic, and that can also help propel sales as well. Many people have compared my work to Dan Brown and his work. I think Daniel Silva is also another author whose work is somewhat like mine. There's some other authors who my work maybe isn't quite so like, in that, myself and these other gentlemen are doing international thrillers. But like Greg Hurwitz, he does domestic thrillers that are all set in Los Angeles. But what I really like about Greg's work is he's got that heart, he's got, the emotional attachment of his primary character. And he just does a fantastic job with that. And so there are authors that I look up to and try to emulate Carlos Ruiz Zafran did a fantastic job with the Cemetery of Forgotten Books series. And again, it's not exactly like mine. It's more suspense than it is an international action thriller. But there were 4 books in that series, and the atmosphere that guy was able to write about with Barcelona in the war was masterful. So there's a number of authors that I look up to and try to bring in the best of what they do into my work. Catherine Neville, I just read her book, The Eight, the other day. I got that for the Christmas holidays, and I found that to be fantastic. That was a lot like the kind of the very subgenre that I'm writing in. And she had published this back before the Da Vinci Code even, and it was one of those that had a lot of soul in it, and some characters that were both in present time in the 1970s as well as back in the late 1700s. And so she used an interesting technique where she told half the story in the late 1700s and half the story in 1973. And she also told part of the story in third person, the part that was back in the late 1700s, and then the part that was told in the 1970s was told in first person. And Barry Eisler has done that a little bit too, but you don't see that very often. And that was it worked in that story. So that was a story that was just whew, blew my hair off. And so I would love to emulate some of her writing style as well. As very very well done. The way that she did, she'd kind of sneak in a little metaphor here and there, and I like to do that once in a while too. So yeah, there's some fantastic authors out there.
Thank you, Avanti. Even though you try to emulate many legends in the thriller genre, you must have something unique about your writing that must have captured the attention of the publishers. Can you say what individual talent you have that makes you shine the most in your work, Avanti?
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit tricky to put my finger on. One of the things that I'm doing differently in these 2 novels is that a lot of the competition, if you will, has strong male lead characters, and some of them have strong female characters as well, but they don't necessarily have the strong female protagonist with other male protagonists. And so or some of my peers will have just female characters. So it seems like there's a lot of, just female characters or male characters, maybe in a team, but it's definitely the male protagonist. And so I'm mixing it up a little bit where I've got a strong female protagonist, but she's surrounded by Will and Bear. So we get just as much or more screen time from them as we do from Maddie Marshall, our female protagonist. And I think that allows the reader, whether they're male or female, to find someone in the story that they connect with and really resonate with. And I think that a good author also has their own voice, and just the words that they choose and the way that they put them together. The book that I just finished is currently called Cleopatra's Vendetta, and it's a different series than this one. It might be a standalone, it might be part of a new series. And one of the characters in there got kind of snarky, like the way that she would say things was kind of not quite bitter, but she was in a very difficult, very stressful situation, and the language that she used and the words that she chose, as she spoke, were very different, and very different than the characters in The Lost Power. So I think that one of the things that I've gotten feedback that I do action very well, and I believe I also do characters, and allow the characters to really come alive on the screen. And I think also a couple of the things that I do differently as well is that my plots are kind of complex. I like to have a lot of twists and turns. And I don't just write simple stories because I get bored when I'm reading somebody else's simple story. So I'm writing stories for myself, and they tend to be pretty complex, pretty fun. They have a lot of intrigue, history, science, and mystery in them. So they're not pure espionage. They're not pure suspense thriller. They're action thrillers that have just a little bit of history in them, and sometimes a little bit of science. So they're kind of a little bit of a blend. Yeah. So those are some of the things that I like to pull in there to keep myself and others turning those pages.
Thank you, Avanti. So you said that what makes you stand out from the other legends of the thriller genre are strong female protagonist and other character leads, and also a complex plot. What I want to ask is, especially in the thriller genre, there is a trope where the plot is always villain driven, whereas the villain presents obstacles and the protagonist must overcome those obstacles. Those things form the crux of the story. Is there anything like that in Solstice Shadows, Avanti?
Absolutely. We've got some fascinating villains. We actually have two really bad guys in Solstice Shadows, and one of them has a tattooed face. He's got tattoos that completely cover his face, and throughout the story, we're not sure if that's a mask, if those are really his tattoos, are they not? He also uses a garrote. He strangles people. That's his modus operandi. The other villain has mismatched eyes. So one is blue and the other one's kind of funky. And he's had a lot of training in Russia. And the two of them, he's the guy that steals the star chart, and he and his boss man in the KGB there in Russia are the ones that are driving quite a bit of the plot. So they and by stealing the star chart, they initiate the plot, and then they're in the Lost Power, they're trying to shoot Maddie and Will and Bear throughout the story. So that one is even more so with antagonists driving the action, because they're everywhere our heroes turn, the bad guys show up and shoot at them.
Sure, Avanti. Despite the fact that you have strong female characters as well as a good plot, you also talked about your expertise in driving action sequences in your stories. It is very easy to capture attention when you're on camera, and you see Hollywood movies doing lots of crazy stunts like in the Fast and Furious movies. But was it really an easy process for you to write action in words, Avanti?
Surprisingly, yes. What's really funny is I'm sort of a pacifist. I think I mentioned earlier that I've studied yoga for a long time, and I'm generally a pretty calm person. And so what was really funny to me as I started my writing journey was to realize that I like action, and if the story goes on too long without some kind of direct conflict like that happening, I tend to get a little bit bored. And so as I'm outlining, right now I'm outlining the third book in the VANOPS series, and I'm like, okay, I need an action beat here. I need an action scene here. I need an action scene here. And it's, I also try to keep it, grounded in reality, without being too incredibly crazy. I think, it's kind of fun to watch action movies with Hollywood. And I like to stretch that as much as I can, but still make it plausible, because if something is just too over the top, then I think it pulls me in and other readers out of the story. But yeah, what's kind of fun about Maddie Marshall is she's into Aikido, which if listeners don't know, Aikido is a nonviolent form of martial arts, whereas maybe some of the others might be more confrontational. Aikido takes the attacker's energy and tries to use it against themselves. Use that attacker's energy to bring about a neutral, peaceful situation. And so that's kind of a fun dynamic in there, because Maddie, when our series begins, she's just this dojo teacher, and she does some app designing, and she's never been shot at. She's never even been in a fight. She's done these Aikido tests, but she's never been in any sort of violent situation. And so writing those scenes where she has to, step up, and she sometimes is walking into these situations that are incredibly dangerous. And so, her heart gets going, and, she's not a trained covert operative. She's never been in the military. She's just somebody, she's an office worker, who has had some Aikido training. And so it's been really fun to watch her character grow and get more confident in her ability to keep herself safe and save others. And it's been fun to explore the different types of action scenes that can be in a novel without redoing the same ones over and over. So, you can have car chase scenes, motorcycle chase scenes. You can have, chase scenes in the water, in boats and jet skis, and you can have, hand-to-hand combat. You can have knife scenes, etc. And so it's so surprisingly, it's been a lot of fun to write those action scenes.
So in Solstice Shadows, you have a lot of action scenes. Do you have mostly hand-to-hand combat, since you talked about Aikido a lot, or are there also gunfights breaking out in the middle of action, Avanti?
Yes. Yes, we have some gunfight scenes. There's one in Turkey. So they're at this ruins in Turkey near Ephesus, where they're trying to, again, solve the riddle of this star chart. And the bad guys show up, and you've got all these stone remnants of thousands of years of civilization, and you have the Russians just shooting without any regard for all of the beautiful temple that had stood there for thousands of years. So yeah, I think it's kind of fun to sometimes have a gunfight in an unexpected place.
Sure, Avanti. You talked about star chart and stone remnants. Do you have fantasy elements in your stories, Avanti?
Do I have time? What?
Fantasy elements, because in the fantasy genre, you have many things like this. Is there any fantasy element in your novel, Avanti?
Maybe a little bit, yeah. I've always been a fan of the fantasy genre. Robert Jordan is one of my all-time favorite authors, and there is a little bit of it's really rather surprising, because it appears as though it's fantasy, but there's only like one little itsy bitsy bit that's a little bit of a stretch. So it's plausible fantasy. So our heroine, Maddie Marshall, without giving too much away, in the Lost Power, she learns that there's these superconductive obelisks that they're trying to find, and so they're obelisks, made of this superconductive meteorite. And superconductivity is basically the ability for energy to move without being caught up in something, like as opposed to copper, which as the electricity in your house goes through it, it loses a lot of its charge. But a superconductive material doesn't do that, and that's why they use superconductivity in MRI machines and high-speed trains in Japan and that sort of thing. And so Maddie's able to find these superconductive obelisks, and because she's a martial artist, she learns to move her energy inside her body. Yoga masters have done this, martial artists masters have done this, and so it's just a little bit of fantasy in that she's able to use her energy to create ball lightning with these obelisks. And ball lightning is actually a real thing too. Just scientists don't really know exactly a whole lot about it, but they agree that it's a phenomenon that exists. They're just not certain kind of how. They think it has something to do with static electricity. So I'm skirting the boundary of fantasy with that one aspect.
Thank you, Avanti. Even though I went off the topic, I asked you about fantasy because I'm a great fan of George R.R. Martin and his A Song of Ice and Fire series, Avanti.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantasy is a lot of fun.
And I also am a great fan of the thriller genre, and learning is a continuous process in any profession. And you came into the writing profession pretty late in your career because you chose IT career first and then switched over to the writing career. Are there any surprising things you learned while creating your books, Avanti?
Yeah, so as we were talking a little bit about the superconductive material, when I started writing The Lost Power, the first in the VANOPS series, I had this idea that there would be a superconductive meteorite, kind of like Superman's kryptonite or something that, comes to the planet, but, a meteorite that contains this superconductive material, because there are a number of materials on Earth that are very superconductive. But because of the way that the story was going, I wanted it to come from a meteorite. And I had written almost, I think I had completed the book. And all of a sudden, I came across an article that scientists had actually discovered superconductive material in meteorites, both in Australia and in Antarctica. So it was very surprising because I didn't think that was realistic. And I like to put a section in the back of my novels, sort of a truth from fiction type thing, so that people can see that even though sometimes some of the science or some of the things that happen in my novels may seem a little bit fantastical, the vast majority of them are rooted in reality, rooted in facts. So yeah, that was one of the bigger surprises that one of the things that I wanted to be real actually was. It was pretty funny.
So the technology that is found in Solstice Shadows have their roots in reality as well. And if I'm someone who doesn't know anything about computers and I have a limited knowledge in science, do you think the jargons found, IT jargons found in Solstice Shadows will overwhelm me as a reader, or will those jargons be explained through expository dialogues, Avanti?
Oh, absolutely. I explain jargon. I don't assume that people know much of anything. I think the only exception to that would be, like in this book I was telling you about, Cleopatra's Vendetta. I had a little bit of fun with a section because the protagonist there is a CEO. And she's been kidnapped, and she's having this fantastical flashback about things that might be happening at work. And on purpose, I use all of these acronyms because as a CEO, she's just, living in acronyms, right? But I think even in that scenario, if you didn't know what the acronyms meant, you would get that she was just doing this deep dive into her worky stuff, right? So I'm pretty conscious about, explaining words and scientific theories and things like that. There's some interesting concepts that happen in both of these books, including Solstice Shadows, and I try very carefully to, explain anything in there that readers might not be familiar with.
Sure, Avanti. I have come across this terminology, particularly in with reference to American culture called woke culture. And there is always this word going around called misrepresentation. How do you handle this pressure of misrepresenting your audience, Avanti? Is it an easy journey or is it a tedious process, as everyone suggests?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question. Misrepresenting the audience? What do you mean?
Because people are talking about misrepresenting gender, misrepresenting culture, and they are talking about going back to movies that came in the 60s and 70s and saying that they don't represent a particular culture or a particular gender and they have to be edited out. Do you think that your writing is shaped by those kinds of pressures, Avanti?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about like misappropriation of cultures, and American Dirt got a lot of trouble for that, and I think there's it's a philosophical question, and because I'm writing fiction, and I'm writing about characters that don't exist, I'm being pretty true to places and to character personalities, but I think as an artist you need to have some flexibility with being able to have characters from different cultures. If all I wrote about was I'm a white woman from America, I think that would be pretty boring, right? So I have an Indian ambassador, and I've never been to India, but I think that I did some, I tried to create a character that that would be realistic, but he's fictional, right? Same thing with, I have Russian characters. I have a Russian bad guy. I have a Russian woman who gets her tongue cut out, and that's all fictional. I've got the head of VANOPS is a black man. I'm not a black man, but he's a person, right? And so it's one of those things that I do my best to create, and I want to show diversity too, in the stories, because I don't just want every person in the story to be a white girl from the Midwest. So I think if you're going to show diversity in your stories, I think the readers need to understand that these are fictional characters that are not necessarily they're not they're fiction, and they should be fun, right? So that's my thought on that. Does that answer your question?
Sure, right, Avanti. That answers my question. I was asking you these things because I was looking at it from an Indian perspective, mostly from a third person perspective, and how that goes into your writing process, Avanti. And thank you for answering that question. When it comes to the dialogue between quality versus quantity, some prefer quality and some want to go after quality. What do you prefer, Avanti? Do you want to be known as the person who has written the most number of novels, or who has given out the best works in suspense genre, thriller genre, Avanti?
Yeah, that's another good question, Karthik. And there's a lot of my peers who are very into quantity. There's a lot of forums that are all about, rapid release and quantity, and, you can't be well known until you've written 20 novels. And so there is a lot of thought in our community that you need to have, written 1,000 novels. And I've thought a lot about that, because that's not how I write. It takes me a long time to write a novel, and I would prefer to be known for quality over quantity. And it can take me, even now, it can take me up to a year to write a novel, because I need to take my time outlining it and working all those different plot twists in there and making sure that I've got, everything that I want to have in there. And then once that's good, then maybe I can write, 2 chapters a day, maybe 3. I have some short chapters. But I think, if I have to choose, I'm going to go quality all the time.
That's a nice answer, Avanti. Quality is always better than quantity, in my opinion.
Good.
In the middle of writing, getting stuck is a natural process, and it is termed as writer's block. How do you overcome your writer's block, Avanti?
Yeah, I think most people, writers, artists, even when I was working in corporate America, I would get blocked. And what I found is that writing is, I've studied brainwave patterns too, and there's a certain brainwave pattern that I get into when I'm in the groove. And so I try to, if I get stuck with an idea, I try to get back in that brainwave pattern, and there's a number of things that I do to get there. I might take a shower. I have great ideas in the shower. In the morning, just when I wake up, I try to write down some ideas at that time. Meditation is actually a great way for me to get in that brainwave pattern where all of a sudden different ideas come together. And I'm also a big hiker and walker. I really like to be outside. I walk around. I'm blessed with a large yard, and I walk around out there a lot. And I find that if I get stuck on something, just moving around for 20 minutes will help all of the ideas flow and get me unstuck.
Right, Avanti. Different people have different methods of overcoming their writer's block, and you are saying that you do yoga and meditation. Since yogic practice is from India, does it help you in both your personal life and also your professional life, Avanti?
Oh, absolutely. I've been studying and practicing Kundalini yoga since I was about 25, and it's helped me through some very difficult times, like when my father died, when I've had some health challenges. I turned to yoga because it's a thousands of year old practice that helps the body, mind, and spirit align. I absolutely count on it for dealing with tough times, personally, and a lot of those tools that I've learned have helped me professionally as well.
Sure, Avanti. Yoga is a practice which not only strengthens the body, it also strengthens the mind. When it comes to fan interaction, it is always good practice to keep in touch with your audience so that you will know the pulse of your own audience. How can readers connect with you, Avanti?
You're absolutely right, Karthik, in that I love to stay in touch with my audience and see what people are thinking. So I have a website, either avanticentrae.com or vanops.net. Both go to the same place, and there's a connect page there where people can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also on my webpage they can get the first 6 chapters of The Lost Power for free. So if they just want to check out my work, they can get that there. They can listen to some audio samples, and they can sign up for my newsletter and get giveaways and special things that I do for my fans only. And I really love to hear from people through like DM on Twitter. So however people like to be social, they can find me there at vanops.net.
Thank you, Avanti. Words are the tools used by the writer to finish a book. And also words have different connotations depending on the context. What is your favorite word in the English language, Avanti?
Oh, that's tough. If I have to choose one.
Maybe you can give top 3.
How about 2? How about 2?
Go ahead. Avanti.
Okay, so the first one I think is, are you familiar with supercalifragilisticexpialidocious?
Definitely not, Avanti.
Okay, so if you've ever watched Mary Poppins, it's sort of a nonsense word that means, all things wonderful and awe-inspiring. So supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's incredibly long and part of a song there. I think the thriller part of me really loves the word mysterious. I think mysterious brings up an aura of mystique and mystery and secrets, and I always want to know more about the mystery or the mysterious item. So I love that word too.
The first word you mentioned, does it come in a song in Mary Poppins, or is it said like a dialogue?
It may be a little bit of dialogue as well, but there's definitely a song there about supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Yeah.
What is your favorite? Which is your favorite version of Mary Poppins? Is it the Julie Andrews one or the recent revamp of the series, Avanti?
I haven't seen the most recent one, but when I was a child, we would watch the original. We'd have a large Thanksgiving family meal, and afterwards the adults would want to do adult talk, and they'd send all the kids off to the TV, and we would sit there and stare at Julie Andrews. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Excellent, Avanti. Now since the name of the show is called the Writer's Preview, we would like to get a taste of what we can expect from Solstice Shadows. So can you give us a preview of Solstice Shadows by reading from it, Avanti?
Sure. Here's what it looks like, and I'll give you a brief taste. These are very short chapters, and so we'll start on chapter 1, San Francisco, California. The story begins on December 18th at 3:51 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Maddie cracked her loft's front door, peered through it, and felt the hair on the back of her neck stand at attention like rows of tiny soldiers about to do battle. There's someone in there. She pulled the entry door almost closed and put a finger to her lips to silence AJ and Vincent, who lingered behind her in the complex's dim, soundless hallway. AJ's 10-year-old eyes grew wide, and her ex raised a brown eyebrow, but they both went still. Heart pounding strong and steady, every sense alert, she willed her breath to deepen so she would be ready for whatever came next. She inched the door back open. Caution had become her friend in the last year and a half. The pencil-thin beam of light she'd seen 2 heartbeats ago flickered off in her bedroom, and pitch-black darkness descended. Although she had closed the living room patio door when she'd left to teach at the Aikido dojo, it was ajar, and damp air filled the loft. The city skyline glittered through the windows, showing off the San Francisco Giants baseball stadium, lit like a gargantuan ornament in festive reds and greens. The air smelled of the frigid rain that drowned the night. Her roommate had texted an hour ago that he was working late. So who was in there? What did they want? There. What was that sound? Something like the scrape of a boot on her hardwood floor. She listened and squinted into the gloom. For the briefest moment, crimson light from the stadium's Christmas decorations glinted off a metal object in the bedroom doorway. A gun. That was all the warning she needed. Maddie yanked the door shut just as the bullet splintered the jam where her knee had been. Run! With both arms, she pushed AJ and Vincent away from the exploding shrapnel, sending all 3 of them sprinting down the shadowed hallway and careening around the corner. Vincent threw his umbrella behind them and it clattered on the tile. 10 feet ahead, the red exit sign heralded the stairwell. A shot hit the wall just behind Maddie, knocking a chunk off a glossy Golden Gate Wall mural. She cringed. She liked that mural. Vincent pulled up short, and she nearly ran into his tall frame. He strained to pull a gun from his left armpit holster, turned back, and shot once around the corner. Frowning, Maddie put her hand on top of the gun. Put that away, she whispered. It'll make things worse. Vincent answered in the cultured voice she used to find sexy. Head downstairs. The index finger of her left hand twitched, and she balled both hands into fists. No, I'll wait inside the stairwell to disarm him. No, go. I'll join you in a minute. Angry at him for not trusting her Aikido skills and escalating the situation, Maddie pressed AJ toward the stairwell, all the while thinking that more assailants could arrive from downstairs. She bent over and whispered, "Run upstairs to the roof and hide." His freckled face, framed by big jug ears and perpetually messy red hair, looked up at her. He used to be a foster child from the dojo, but she thought of him as hers now, and wanted the adoption paperwork to be official yesterday. What if she died today? Love for him poured through her heart as he nodded, fear and determination in his eyes. As the sound of Vincent's next shot echoed down the hallway, she reached around AJ, opened the metal stairwell door, and ushered him toward the wet and muddy linoleum landing. His small feet made no sound as he padded up the stairs. Guessing that what she'd hidden in her loft had placed him in danger, her heart overflowed with guilt. But who knew it was there? She reached for her phone and dialed the police. You want more?
No, Auntie. If you want to share more, you can go ahead, Avanti. We have a few more minutes.
Okay, I'll read the next chapter. It's just 2 pages.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, 3:54 p.m. Rounding the corner of the stairwell, AJ paused to look back. Through a rectangular glass pane in the door, Maddie looked at him with wide green eyes full of love. In the black jacket, cabbie hat, and blue jeans she typically wore after changing out of her gi, she looked fierce, as though she'd personally block anyone from hurting him. With a phone to her ear, she pointed up the stairs and mouthed, "Go!" Another gunshot boomed through the hall, and AJ used it like a sprinter's starting gun, panting as he raced up the 4 flights of stairs to the rooftop patio. Hide! But where? 2 metal patio tables with 4 chairs stood to his right, wet from the falling rain. In front of him was the city's bright skyscape. To his left, the top landing of the wrought iron fire escape looked like prison bars. Shivering from the cold, he moved around the back of the tall structure that enclosed the door. The area was dark and scary, but it might be a spot to hide if he could overcome his fear of the dark and make himself explore it. He hated the dark, but as his eyes adjusted and the shaking subsided, he realized there was no good hiding place back there, only large metal boxes that he guessed housed some sort of heating equipment. Afraid to make a sound, he tiptoed around the entire rooftop, avoiding shiny black puddles as best he could. A loud sound blasted through the chill night air. Another gunshot? What if Maddie was shot? She was always kind to him, ever since he started taking classes at the dojo. His foster parents were nice, but they had 5 other kids at the house. He didn't get a lot of their attention. But Maddie had wanted to take him to ride roller coasters on his birthday and was trying to adopt him. She was as good a teacher as the sensei who owned the dojo, and she often came to his rescue during his nightmares. He walked back to the fire escape and looked down. A couple of flights below, there was a 2-person patio table perched on the landing. It blocked the exit down, but at the moment he didn't care. The table was draped with a waterproof tablecloth, which meant it'd provide better coverage than the larger ones up here. The fire escape gate creaked as he opened it and scurried down the stairs. Reaching the table, he ducked beneath it. At least it wasn't dark. With his back to the railing, he pulled his soggy knees to his chest and tried to quiet his breathing. He quivered with fear for Maddie, for himself. Could he do anything to help her? What would he do if Maddie were killed? He lived for the dojo in nights like tonight when they were supposed to eat popcorn and watch a movie while cuddled up on the couch in her loft. Yes, that was a better thought. Popcorn, with his big dog Damien curled up at their feet, chewing on a bone while they laughed at the TV. Maddie's broad-shouldered boyfriend Bear would be there too, one strong hand on Maddie's arm, protecting them both. Eyes closed, fantasy playing through his mind, he could almost shut out the sound of gunfire and distant sirens. He'd be safe from eyes above, but as his fingers caressed the grate beneath him, he realized he was still vulnerable from below.
Thank you, Avanti. Thank you for that captivating reading session, and we cannot wait to get our hands on Solstice Shadows.
You're very welcome. It was fun.
And for the YouTube audience, you can find the purchase links in the description box below. You can go and click on the link, and you can purchase Solstice Shadows from the website mentioned below. Now, we have the time has come for the question and answer session from the YouTube audience. Avanti, if you don't mind, can we take a few questions from our YouTube audience?
Of course, that'd be fun. Will you read them to me?
Yeah, I'm going to read them to you. Looks like the YouTube audience have been very busy in the chat box. The first question comes from PK. Is there a point of time where writing becomes difficult as a task?
Well, it hasn't happened yet. It may, and there are certainly times when I want to pull my hair out. So like if I'm outlining, like where I'm at right now with the third book in the series, and sometimes it just doesn't gel, and it doesn't gel, and it doesn't gel, and I just want to take my hair and pull it, and so I get frustrated. But that's also the most rewarding when, you know, I finally get the idea that pulls it all together, or, you know, enables the conflict of that part of the book, or, you know, I'm able to put that plot twist together. So the part that's kind of sometimes the most frustrating is the most empowering once I move through that. So it remains a joy to me. It's a lot of fun, and when I'm through with the outlining stage and I have a couple sentences and I know what chapter that I want to write, what's really fun is when I get writing and I get some new idea about something that I hadn't expected, you know, the characters to go this direction or that. And so in many ways, as an author, I'm discovering the story as I'm writing it, even though I have an idea of the beginning and the end and where we're going. There's still room for discovery as I write it, and it's a blast.
Do you outline your story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, Avanti, or do you go along with your how do you say it, with the thoughts that currently hold you?
Yeah, so I'm a big outliner, and I'm a big believer in story structure. And for any new writers out there, I would highly suggest that you study story structure, because there's some really neat shortcuts that you can learn about the midpoint and the pinch points that happen along the way. And what I'll often do is I'll outline, and then I'll compare to some of those story structure type things that are used very effectively in film and in literature to help propel a story forward.
Next question comes from Mahalingam Avanti, and he asks, do you develop your characters from your real life acquaintances or the people you know?
Not really. The characters are generally. I mentioned the Enneagram earlier, and it's a wonderful tool, both personally and professionally. And this is it's a psychological system, so it's not astrology, but it's based in psychology, and it's based in the idea that the face that we present to the world is the mirror image of that which we are hiding. And so it's once I understood that, both about myself and about my family and the people that I knew, it made creating realistic characters much easier. One of the fun things that I like to do is when I'm developing a new character, I like to go out on Google and do some searching for a face. And then I'll take a screenshot of that face and I'll put it in with my little bio of that character that, includes, mannerisms. So I may pull, just like a little piece from a person that I know here, or a little piece from somebody that I met at the train station there. But the character becomes their own thing. Yeah. Their own person.
Definitely, Avanti. And what you said about pulling pictures from Google, That's something that we have never heard before, and I'm sure many writers will try to imitate your habit. And let us move on to the next question, Avanti. And this
Sure.
comes from Priyadarshini. Priyadarshini asks, what is your next project, and when can we expect its release?
Yeah, that's a great question, Priyadishini. So the next project is currently titled Cleopatra's Vendetta. And I don't know if you have seen, but Gal Gadot, who just starred in the Wonder Woman franchise, has signed on with Patty Jenkins to do a Cleopatra film. And we think that it's going to be sort of a remake of the one that Elizabeth Taylor did back in the 30s, sort of a dramatization of Cleopatra's life. The book that I wrote takes the idea of Cleopatra's archenemy and how they've been, battling for, they battled during their lifetime, but the idea there is that he created a cult called the Sons of Adam that is still in our time today. And Cleopatra set some things in motion during the end of her life to try to beat her arch enemy. And so the people that get caught up in this big battle that these people had started thousands of years ago are Tim and Angie Stryker. And Angie and their daughter get kidnapped. And so Tim Stryker has to find Angie and his daughter, and along the way shake the very pillars of Western civilization to do that. I believe that the story is going to be released about the same time as the movie to take advantage of some of the marketing that Gal Gadot is doing. We don't know yet when that film will be released. I don't know if it will be Christmas next year or some other time. So in the meantime, I'm outlining the third novel in the VANOPS series, and that may very well come out before Cleopatra's Vendetta. So because I'm in the outline stage, I don't know exactly how long it's going to take to get that one out. But in the meantime, there's The Lost Power and Solstice Shadows, and that should keep people busy for a little while anyway.
Your next project is titled Cleopatra's Vendetta, am I right, Avanti?
Yes.
And congratulations on getting Gal Gadot to play the lead role in your adaptation, Avanti.
I know. How great is that?
Yeah.
No, it's. I think it's going to be, a different rendition that Gal Gadot stars in. I wish it was. I wish it was my film, but I can't take credit for that screenplay. Mine's more a thriller. I believe what Gal's going to be doing is more of a biography, a dramatic biography. But there's still some. I think it will still spur some interest in Cleopatra. She was a fascinating woman. She was, head of the Navy. She made all the decisions. She was one of the last true empresses, and some of that comes through in my story.
Female empowerment seems to be the hot topic today, and we already had a film released recently, Wonder Woman. I don't know the title. Is it 1984?
The George Orwell novel, 1984?
No, ma'am. No, Avanti. The recent Gal Gadot release.
Yeah, Wonder Woman, 1984. Yes, that came out right around Christmas time. Yes. Yeah, did you see it?
I haven't seen it yet, but I will. Since I was a fan of the first movie, I'm holding my expectations for the second one, since it did not get a good critical reception at the moment. Have you seen it, Avanti?
I did see it. Yes, we streamed it at home, and I enjoyed it. It's very much a comic book type of adaptation. So if you go into it with that expectation that it's going to have some of those comic book fantastical kind of elements, then it's just a joyride. And Gal Gadot does a wonderful job.
Yeah, Indians like melodrama a lot, and from the trailers and from the few clips that I've seen, there seems to be a lot of melodrama in the movie, Avanti.
Yes, there's plenty of melodrama in Wonder Woman 1984, definitely.
Next question comes from Divya, and she asks, as you mentioned that you are a yoga practitioner, have you ever had lucid spiritual experiences that you try to blend in the plots of your stories, Avanti?
I have had some fascinating experiences. I don't know that I would call them lucid, but I've maybe done lucid dreaming, once or twice. Maddie has prescient dreams. So Maddie has dreams that sometimes come true. Not very often, but they can come true. And I have actually experienced that 2 very notable times. And so I thought it would be really interesting to have Maddie have that same skill. And she and Will also have that sort of twin bond. And I've had some neat experiences with some people that I've felt very connected to. And so I do bring those spiritual experiences into my work. Yeah.
From what you said, I'm tracing a lot of history in your works. Like, for example, Maddie comes from a lineage of Spanish royalty, and Cleopatra, as you know, is from Egyptian royalty. Are you a history buff, Avanti?
I didn't really think that I was until I started writing, and I did enjoy when I was a kid. I enjoyed some of those, John Jakes. When I was young, the thicker the book, the better. And those John Jakes novels of the 70s and 80s, where he would take some historical aspect and talk about it, were just great. I didn't really enjoy studying history in high school or college, but I do like reading about it, and it's a fascinating topic. The more I've gotten into it with my writing, I really love pulling in historical figures and thinking about well, what if? And so a lot of The Lost Power is about Alexander the Great. And what if he found an Egyptian weapon that nobody knew that he found and was using that to conquer the world? And so I like doing those sort of what ifs, right? Like, what if Cleopatra had hidden away the location of this crazy cult? What if? So it's fun to be able to use history as a springboard, and I really enjoy researching it. And I think the other place and time when I really kind of fell in love with history is with the architecture. And as I've traveled the world and seen, these cathedrals that would take 200, 300, 400 years to create this amazing work of art, kind of human history sort of blows me away. And both in terms of how long we've been practicing yoga, thousands of years, right? The shamanic rituals, the Egyptian pyramids, the cities that we've built, the history of religions and civilizations, and how we're just doomed to repeat it, if we don't figure out kind of what we did before. So yeah, from the Great Wall to Gaudi's Cathedral in Barcelona, it's all pretty fascinating.
Thank you, Avanti. Alternate history has always been a great read for me. Do you think you can try your hand in creating stories about alternate histories, like what if Russia won the Cold War, or what if the British colonialism still existed and we were still as Indians under the British rule? What do you think about such stories, Avanti?
I think Raymond Khoury recently did one of those. I don't really think it's my thing to write. I don't know, maybe I'll change my mind somewhere along the way. I feel like by kind of taking just a little twist on history, and then showing all of the repercussions of like, what if Alexander the Great did have that mysterious Egyptian weapon, and what if the first king of Spain came across it along the way? how would that, play out in the lives of our characters today? I think the type of alternate history that you're talking about, the scope and scale of the world building that would be involved in doing that. There's a reason I don't write fantasy, and it's that that world building. I kind of like focusing on the suspense and the characters and the action a little bit more than creating entirely new worlds, which I think is what you get into with the world building. So I think I'll leave that to people that are more drawn to that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Avanti. It is important to know one's own strengths and weaknesses, and it is pretty evident that you are well aware of your own true strengths. And I hope that we can expect more thriller novels from you, Avanti. Next question comes from Raj, and he says, if you can explain the characteristics of your protagonist in one word, what would it be?
Hey, Raj, that's a tough one. Maddie would probably be integrity. That would probably be her one word, integrity. She's very much a truth seeker. She loves to do the right thing.
In what context are you trying to say that she stands for integrity? I mean, does she fight for the integrity of others or her own integrity, Avanti?
Both. I think she, when our series begins, she's, like I mentioned, she's all about nonviolence, and she's confronted with these violent situations, and so she has to find her own integrity within that. She despises lying. She wants to get to the truth of what's happened with her father. He's murdered at the very beginning of the first novel, and so there's a lot of words that I could use to describe Maddie, but I think integrity is kind of the heart and soul of what she's all about.
Maddie stands for integrity. That's a good answer. That's all the questions we have from our YouTube audience. Thank you very much, Avanti, for staying with us and answering all the questions patiently from our side as well as from YouTube audience.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love hearing from fans, and as we talked earlier, people can connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or on my webpage at vanops.net. And if people do get a chance to check out my work, it would be fantastic if any of your audience would circle back and let me know if they have as much fun reading it as I had writing it. That'd be great.
Thank you very much, Avanti, and we had a great time chatting with you, and we got to know you as well as your writing journey, and also we had a preview of Solstice Shadows when you read from it. It's time for me to say goodbye to you, Avanti, and we hope that you come again to the writer's preview when Cleopatra's Vendetta comes out, Avanti.
I would enjoy that, and thank you, Karthik. It's been very much a pleasure getting to know you as well. Have a great day.
Thank you, Avanti. And now, before we end the show, I always like to read quotations from the internet. And this quotation comes from George Orwell. And I quote, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." I unquote. We are going through this pandemic called the coronavirus, and it had swallowed the entirety of the year 2020. But in the year 2021, as we march towards getting vaccinated, as well as getting rid of the spread of this virus, truth becomes an invaluable thing. In the place of lies, always tell the truth. It will not only save lives, but it will also lay the foundation for our future generation. This is Karthik saying goodbye. See you on the next episode of The Writer's Preview.